This podcast is brought to you by Free Buddhist Audio, the Dharma for your life. Our work is funded entirely by donations from our generous listeners. If you would like to help us keep this free, make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. Thank you, and happy listening.
So when we were planning this a while back, Kamala asked me to give a talk on Buddhism and politics, because I gave 3 talks on that topic last year at Croydon. If anyone's interested, they're on Free Buddhist Audio. But I dug the talks out and they felt a bit like the talks I gave last year. So there was a little bit of resistance. And then I got inspired. So I've written another talk, which is called The Rise of the Asharas and the Sword of Wisdom. Yeah. So it's a new talk. It's a very different approach to the same area. It's definitely about Buddhism and the world, Buddhism and the state of the world that we're living in. And it's one particular Buddhist's reflection on what the Dharma, what the Buddhist teaching has got to say about all that. So I'm going to start with the very well-known image of the Wheel of Life. So I guess some of you, but maybe not all of you, know the Wheel of Life. So it's a very central image in the Buddhist tradition. And it's an image of this monster called Yama holding a wheel. And, the wheel, of course, is turning. So there's this idea of just life going round and round, maybe repeating the same old patterns sometimes. I guess also that there's the connotation of sometimes if you're on a wheel, sometimes you're going up and sometimes you're going down. So it's also like a wheel of fortune. And it's an image for unenlightened existence from the Buddhist point of view. It's an image of what it's like before awakening, before enlightenment. And in this world, known as samsara, there are all sorts of different forms of consciousness. So that's the Buddhist view of things, that this universe, this cosmos is teeming. It's full of consciousness, of different kinds, different modes, different styles, if you like. So there are, quite heavenly spiritual consciousnesses. There's human consciousness. There's more animal-like consciousness, and so on. So the Buddhist universe is a universe of all sorts of different forms or styles of consciousness. And part of this image of the Wheel of Life is what's called the 6 realms. So there are the 6 sections in this wheel. And they're like 6 realms or 6 worlds. And the idea behind that is that a certain kind of consciousness, a certain sort of state of mind and heart, gives rise to a very particular world of experience. If we're in a certain state of consciousness, we will live in a certain kind of world. So again, there is kind of heavenly worlds, there's more human worlds, there are hellish worlds, states of hatred and where people experience the world as very constricted and hot and oppressive. There are hungry ghost worlds, worlds where the basic consciousness is one of craving and addiction, and the world seems sort of grey and featureless and empty and hollow, and so on. There are also, worlds of pleasure and delight, and there's also the human world. So this idea that our consciousness gives rise to a whole world, to a whole way of sort of experiencing where we are and what's around us. And it goes sort of quite deep. It's quite sort of fundamental. It's not that different people, they're in the same reality, but they sort of interpret it differently. It's even deeper than that. It's like, because they're in a certain state of consciousness, that's what they experience. So for example, if you're with someone who's, say, paranoid, they might be interpreting, oh, well, so-and-so said that because they're trying to get at me, And it was nothing to do with them. It was nothing to do with that. It was something else going on over here. And you're trying to persuade them. But you can't persuade them, can you? It's sort of deeper than that. It's sort of their mental and emotional state means that's what they experienced. And actually what you're trying to do is tell them that they didn't experience what they experienced, which is obviously a very difficult thing to do, So, you kind of get the idea that out of a certain state of mind, a certain state of consciousness, everything we experience is sort of mediated through that. is constructed in a certain kind of way, and as a consequence, we live in a certain kind of world. Yeah, we live, our worlds overlap to the extent that we share a kind of common consciousness. Our world overlaps, and we experience a shared world, a common world. But we also, to some extent, live in different worlds of our own making, worlds that are mind-made, as it were. Yeah. So this is the idea behind the 6 realms on the Wheel of Life. Yeah. And one of the realms is the realm of the Ashuras. Yeah. So this goes back to the Indian mythology of the time, where you've got the God realm, where they're very sort of expansive, sort of spiritual beings, and because they live in very happy, expansive states of mind, they've got this wish-fulfilling tree. Yeah, they have in their realm is the wish-fulfilling tree, and sort of next door, as it were, are the Ashuras, and they're always in battle with the gods, trying to get hold of the wish-fulfilling tree. Yeah, so in some of the images of the Wheel of Life, you can see the picture of the tree. On one side are the kind of gods, floating around, eating nectar and generally blissing out. And on the other side are these warring beings trying to get hold of the wish-fulfilling tree. So they're not doing it because they've sort of earned it, as it were. They're trying to get it through power, through force, through domination, and so on. Yeah. So the Ashuras, they're the titans. They're the anti-gods. They're, in a way, very powerful, impressive beings, but they experience life as a battle. Yeah, life is about domination. Life is about appropriation and getting. Yeah, this is the realm of the Ashuras. So I'm going to describe a particular kind of Ashura realm. Yeah, I'm going to describe what I see as the rise of the Ashuras. Yeah. So in this Ashura realm, the basic sort of view, the basic world view that informs it is that happiness comes from wealth, from power, from status, from appropriating things, having things, and so on. Yeah. The basic view is that power is how the world works. Yeah. That's how you get things done. That's what moves the world forward. Yeah. So yeah, in this realm, they glory in the strong individual. Yeah, that's what's seen as an ideal, kind of strong, forceful, assertive, powerful individuals, as it were. And there's a kind of view or a belief that what's best for the individual is what's best for the whole group. Just let individuals, let rip, as it were, and somehow that will kind of be of benefit to the whole group. Yeah, let individuals strive and compete and excel, and the whole group or the whole tribe will be strong. Yeah, and sometimes this is based on a view of, well, that's how nature works, isn't it? In nature, we have the survival of the fittest. The strongest sort of benefit, and that benefits the whole species or the whole group. Yeah, so that's the sort of basic worldview. Yeah, life is a battle. You strive to dominate and control limited resources. You either win or you lose. And who wants to be a loser? Yeah. So in this world, greed is good. Selfishness is a virtue. Yeah. So it's a life of unbridled competition, pure competitiveness. Yeah. So those are the sort of basic worldviews and values. And then, they start to infiltrate all areas of Ashura life. Yeah. So I'm going to describe some of that. Yeah. So in this world of the Ashuras, nature is basically there to be exploited. Yeah. The Ashuras tear up the earth. They consume its resources. Yeah. They build vast, intensive factories crammed full of animals that live, oppressive short lives, and then are just consumed, just seen as a resource to be used up, as it were. Yeah. And the view behind that is that, well, we should take as much as from nature as we can. That's what it's there for. It's just a resource to be consumed. This world of the Ashuras has its own economic theories. Yeah. Don't let taxation and regulation get in the way of the rich and the powerful. Let them generate as much wealth as they can. Yeah. So this world of the Ashuras is also a world of vast inequality. Some people have bonuses that are bigger than some people's whole annual pay. Yeah. There are no checks and constraints. So it starts to become a world of just breathtaking financial corruption, financial scandal. Yeah. The Ashura world has its distinctive architecture. Yeah. Vast edifices of granite and concrete and metal and glass. In a way, again, impressive, awesome, but real, statements of Ashura wealth, Ashura importance, just gleaming symbols of a certain ability and importance and value system. In this Ashura world, sport becomes more and more gladiatorial. There are vast stadiums where huge audiences just watch, again, an impressive spectacle. These sportsmen and sportswomen who are paid huge sums of money, to entertain, to kind of dazzle with their skill, with their courage, and with sheer drive and determination to always win. Yeah. In this Ashura world, pages and pages of newspapers, magazines and websites are taken up with the allure of fame and wealth, another spectacle of glory and success of the individual. Again, the fascination of money, of status, of fame, of celebrity. In this Ashura world, what you own, what you wear, is an expression of what you are. Yeah? Ashura values are expressed and embodied in more and more kind of facets and details of everyday life. So, for example, cars in this Ashura world, they start to be built bigger and bigger. Yeah, they have dark windows and bright headlights and massive glossy bumpers that say, "Get off! Don't touch what you can't afford, and get out of my way." Yeah, and in this Ashura world, everyone is in a hurry. They're always trying to get where they want to get as quickly as possible. Ashura travel gets faster and faster. And under the surface, there's a kind of, always not far under the surface, there's a kind of underlying aggression, even just a kind of getting about and getting from place to place. Even our time starts to become a commodity, which is there to be exploited and managed. And then, of course, there's Ashura politics. So if life is aggression, competition, conflict, domination, then that's what happens in society and in politics as well. It becomes more aggressive, more tribal, more polarised. And you get a seeming paradox that the world that exalts the individual, is also the realm of the tribal. Because not everyone can be the strongest individual, but maybe you can be part of the strongest group. So you get the rise of the strong man or strong woman leader. These are leaders who rise to power by claiming they'll fight the enemy within, maybe an elite or a class or an immigrant population, or they'll fight the enemy without, another nation or another power bloc. And they divide and rule. They stoke fear and division rather than govern, rather than negotiate and compromise for the common good. So you get the rise of nationalism. You get the rise of a politics of identity, where people define themselves as part of this group as against that group. They define themselves as, one thing over and against the other. So in this Ashura world, politics becomes more polarised and factionalised. People become more separated and divided, rather than coming together to debate and dialogue. Those shared public spaces where that can happen become rarer, become weaker. And because there are weaker shared spaces, that means there's a weaker shared truth. What each group wants to be true becomes their truth, gradually becomes the truth. So in this Ashura world, society is weakened and undermined and replaced with a battle of individuals and a battle of competing groups. So yeah, what I'm trying to show is that out of a basic worldview, a basic sort of view of what life is, and a basic sort of value system, arises a whole world. It kind of filters out and creates a whole world, yeah? And then that world seems to sort of reinforce and justify and confirm the kind of views and values that kind of created it in the first place, yeah? So it becomes cyclic, hence the wheel of life, yeah? It just goes round and becomes sort of self-perpetuating, self-reinforcing, yeah? So yes, seeing life as acquisition, status, winning over others, it starts to shape and colour all dimensions of life, yeah? And it's really hard not to be sucked into that, yeah? You don't want to be crushed by the system. So, well, yes, I've just got to put myself first, yeah? I've got to play by the same rules, yeah? And so, yeah, we're kind of drawn into that samsaric way of existing, way of being, as it were. And also when you're in it, it's just hard to see what's going on, yeah? It's hard to see what's happened. It's so close, it's so kind of all around you that it's hard to see what's really going on, yeah? As Carl Jung once said, you can't see the lion that's eaten you, yeah? So you can probably see where I'm going with this. I think we're living in the world of the ashras, yeah? I think in our lifetimes, you know, sometime in the last few decades, ashra views, ashra values have become more and more ascendant, yeah? The ashras are taking over, yeah? And of course my picture, you know, it might be a bit stark, maybe I've exaggerated a bit their kind of rise and dominance. Of course, ashra values aren't new. You know, power struggle has always been there in human life. And of course, this isn't the whole story. It's not, you know, it's not, there are many, many other things going on, many other kind of values that are at play in the world. Nevertheless, I've sort of been reflecting on this as a way of seeing our world and as a way of seeing what's been going on in recent times of our world, yeah? If you look at our attitude to nature, economics, politics, even things like culture and sports, architecture, even our relationship to time, it seems there's a certain sort of ashra consciousness, ashra kind of view that's at play in the world and which has become more and more sort of influential and dominant, yeah? So I just want to say one thing about this, just to kind of qualify this slightly, yeah? So the picture I've painted, it might look like I'm criticising the political right and advocating a sort of left-wing perspective, yeah? But actually my position is a bit different to that, yeah? Because I think these ashra values can be found across the political spectrum, yeah? So, for example, on the left, things can be very, very factional, very, very tribal. There can be a lot of sort of righteous anger and indignation in left-wing politics, which is quite ashra-like, yeah? I think there are certain aspects of left-wing identity politics which can be a bit, you know, there's a certain kind of shadow side of that which can be ashra-like, yeah? And I think there are more subtle and complex ways in which this very, very individualistic worldview has been influenced on the left as well, yeah? It's a little bit, I can't quite, you know, fully articulate that right now in this talk, but a book which has had a big influence on me is a book by a guy called Michael J. Sandel. Don't know if any of you know him, but he wrote a book called The Tyranny of Merit. The subtitle was What's Become of the Common Good. And I found this a really, really good book for sort of understanding our times and understanding the rise of Trump and people like that. And he, you know, very, very simply and briefly, he talks about the rise of individualism, the rise of, you know, people just doing well for themselves and getting on in life, and how, you know, there's a very, very positive side to that. But he sort of shows that, you know, he argues that there's a shadow side, that it's a kind of individualism which has eroded our sense of the common good, eroded our sense of being a community, and it's just people are more in their own world, kind of getting on with their own life, as it were. Yeah. So yes, in a way, what I'm saying isn't a left-right thing. I'm looking at the kind of values underneath that, and I think in certain ways, those values have become influential in all sorts of different areas of life, in all sorts of different parts of the political spectrum. There are Ashuras of the right, but there are Ashuras of the left. There's tribes of the right and of the left as well. Yeah. So yeah, that's my kind of reflection, that we're living in a world where the Ashuras and that way of life, that whole view of life, is in the ascendant. Yeah. So one of the other things in this image of the wheel of life is that in each of these 6 realms, a Buddha appears. Yeah. So again, if you look at the image, and you see, it's quite a busy, full image, but if you look carefully, you'll see in each of the realms, a Buddha appears. The Buddha is a different colour, and in each realm they hold a different implement. Yeah, they bring a sort of symbolic object. And what this represents is the Buddha coming to help the beings of that particular realm move to a better place. What do they need, or what do they need to do in order to sort of change their consciousness so as to then live in a better world, as it were? So this is what these Buddhas and their implements that they bring represent. Yeah, how can those beings move to a better realm and ultimately just get off the wheel of life completely, get off samsara into awakening, into enlightenment? Yeah. And in the Tibetan tradition, these Buddhas are seen as manifestations of Avalokiteshvara. So Avalokiteshvara is the Bodhisattva of compassion.
It's behind you.
It's behind me.
The other way.
Just there. Yeah. So that's what the Tibetans believe. And, maybe all of you have heard the Avalokiteshvara mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, the mantra of the Bodhisattva of compassion. So the 6 symbols of that mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, it's said that they go round the 6 realms. Yeah. So when you're chanting that mantra, each syllable of the mantra goes to a different realm, as it were. Yeah. Very, very sort of lovely idea that when you're chanting that, so that's what those prayer flags are. The idea of Tibetan prayer flags is the wind blows through them. They've got all these mantras printed on them, and then the wind takes them all round the 6 realms. And those prayer wheels, that you see them sort of spinning, that's the same idea. You're spinning them and sending the mantras around the 6 realms, as it were. Yeah. But yeah, the basic idea is this Buddha appearing with a particular object or implement. So in the realm of the Ashuras, it's a green Buddha who appears, and he's holding a sword. Yeah. So for the rest of the talk, I've got 4 reflections on what does that mean. Yeah. So they're the kind of aggressive, they see life as a battle. So why is the Buddha bringing them a sword? Surely he shouldn't be encouraging them. And what does that sword mean? Why a sword? What does that signify? Yeah. So I've got 4 reflections on this. Yeah. So first reflection is that it's a sword of fearlessness. Yeah. So some of you will know, so it's the green Buddha that appears in the Ashura realm. Some of you will know that the green Buddha is particularly associated with fearlessness. Yeah. So yeah, it's a sword of fearlessness. And the reason for that is that the Ashura realm might look powerful and it might look impressive. And in a way it can be. But it's also a realm of insecurity. It's a realm of constantly having to look over your shoulder to make sure that someone else isn't going to get one over of you. It's a realm of fear of losing control. Yeah. I mean, when did you ever see an Ashura looking relaxed and happy? Yeah. So yeah, the Buddha is bringing the sword of fearlessness. He's got a message for them. Yeah. So I want to quote from a book by David Foster Wallace. I'll just read you this quote. Yeah. In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there's no such thing as atheism. There's no such thing as not worshipping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And an outstanding reason for choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they're where you tap real meaning in life, then you'll never have enough. Never feel you have enough. It's the truth. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you'll always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing you, you will die a million deaths before they finally plant you. Worship power. You'll feel weak and afraid, and you'll need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay. Yeah? So worship power. You'll feel weak and afraid, and you'll need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay. So this, in a way, echoes some words of the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, in a teaching called the Atthadanda Sutta. The Buddha said, fear is born of arming oneself. Fear is born of arming oneself, which is maybe a surprise. It's one of those statements where the Buddha turns what we usually think totally upside down, gets us to kind of look at it in a completely different way. Because we usually think we feel fear and therefore we arm ourselves. But the Buddha's saying, no, we arm ourselves. Yeah, we wrap ourselves with power, possessions, control. And because we do that, we live in fear. Yeah, if we arm ourselves in the wrong way, we'll live in fear. Yeah. So yeah, that's my first reflection on the green Buddha and this sword that he carries. He's showing the relationship between power and fear. Yeah, he's showing the delusion of power in a way, and he's pointing the way to a truer, deeper, real fearlessness. So second reflection, the sword is also a sword of wisdom. Yeah. So this is classically what the sword represents in the Buddhist tradition, is a wisdom. So it's a kind of wisdom that can just sort of cleanly sort of cut through things with real sort of clarity, as it were. Yeah. So yeah, it's a sword of wisdom, and it's pointing out the reason why that love or worship of power and control and status and all the rest of it, why that leaves us feeling fearful and powerless. Yeah. And the reason, of course, is because it's the worship of what's just ephemeral, what can't last. It's the worship of what's contingent, what depends on conditions in a vast world where those conditions are never entirely going to be under our control. However hard we fight, however impressive we are, however kind of driven, we never can control all the conditions. So there's if that's how you live by, there's always going to be the fear and security of things slipping out of your control, slipping through your fingers, as it were. Yeah, we're placing our hope, we're placing our reliance just in an unrealistic way, just sort of fighting reality. Yeah, fighting a battle which we can never finally win, as it were. Yeah. So yeah, the sword of wisdom is saying, yeah, it's fundamentally, intrinsically a life of insecurity. So Sangharakshita, who founded this particular Buddhist movement, when he was teaching in the 70s and 80s, he sometimes talked about the Buddhist life and the spiritual life in terms of becoming a true individual. Yeah, he had this teaching of the true individual. Yeah, so he saw spiritual maturity or progress or growth as in terms of more individuality. Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah, you can maybe see how he would equate those. As we practice, we gain more awareness, we gain more self-knowledge. So we sort of know ourselves, we become more individual in that sense. Yeah. We maybe understand our conditioning. We become free of maybe certain unhelpful conditioning. Yeah, we're able to be more sort of creative. So there's an individuality in that sense. Perhaps we're less afraid of disapproval of other people. Yeah, we're able to be more authentically ourselves. We're more able to be sort of spontaneous and true to ourselves, as it were. Yeah, and yeah, we're putting maybe certain ideals, certain values, more and more at the centre of our lives, trying to sort of live from those with more sort of clarity and conviction. So again, you could see that as a growth of individuality, as becoming a true individual. Yeah. But the important thing about this is it's the true individual. Yeah. It's not individualism. Yeah. It's not just a simple kind of assertion of me and mine and what I want. Yeah. It's individuality, yes, but based on a higher ideal. It's individuality sort of integrating itself around a higher ideal of wisdom and compassion and awakening, so on. Even individuality serving a higher ideal, yeah? So yeah, individuality, I would say, needs that higher ideal, yeah? If you don't have that, individuality will just become egoism. It will just become sort of self-promoting. It will just become an end in itself, yeah? So this was Sangharakshita's teaching of the true individuality. So I've got the sword of fearlessness, the sword of wisdom, and now a reflection on the sword of justice. Yeah. So in the Western tradition, maybe more than the East, I don't know, but in the West, the sword is a symbol of justice. So sometimes in law courts, you see the symbol of scales and a sword, don't you?
The Old Bailey.
Yeah, that's right, above the Old Bailey, yeah. So justice is a big word. It's one of those big words, and it has many meanings, many connotations. You know, there's legal justice, there's social justice. So I've just got one reflection on this, you know, big topic, but just one reflection to share on the sword of justice, yeah. And this reflection comes from a figure called Dr. Ambedkar. So again, some of you will know him, but some not. So just to really briefly and try and explain who he was. He was a figure who lived in India in the 20th century, and he was born as an untouchable. So he was born, you know, right at the bottom, or not even at the bottom, out, you know, underneath the caste system in India. And despite, you know, coming from an incredibly underprivileged background, he somehow managed to get an education and became a lawyer. It's actually an incredible story that deserves to be much better known in the West, of what he overcame and what he did. And he basically gave his life to fighting the caste system. And yeah, I can't tell the whole story now, but first of all, he did that politically and was very, very successful. He did amazing things. But he, at a certain time, he started to see the limitations of that, because he realised that caste, you know, it wasn't laws and constitutions, it was in here. It was ideas in people's heads and in people's hearts, yeah? So he started to realise something deeper than political change was needed, although that was needed as well. And he eventually became a Buddhist. He converted to Buddhism, and millions of his followers followed him. And he saw, you know, Buddhism as a way of just repudiating caste and finding one's dignity and, you know, a positive ideal to live by, as it were. Anyway, that's a whole story. But one of the things he talked about was liberty, equality and fraternity. Yeah. And he said, I don't get these from the French Revolution, but from the Buddha. Yeah. So he had a sort of a whole thing about how he derived those values from the Buddha. So I'm going to talk about his ideas on fraternity. So for him, for Ambedkar, fraternity was another name for democracy. Yeah. So democracy wasn't a system of government, a way of voting in a government. Democracy was an attitude. Yeah. That what democracy meant or needed or required was an attitude of respect for other people, of sort of fellow feeling, of, you know, really kind of realising and feeling your common humanity, that we, you know, we share the same pains, you know, prick us and we'll bleed the same blood, all that kind of thing. Yeah, it's an attitude of common humanity. So in other words, it's what Buddhists call metta, loving kindness. Yeah, democracy, real genuine democracy, kind of can only really rest on an attitude of metta, on an attitude of respect and fellow feeling and sense of common humanity. So for Ambedkar, when you were doing the Metta Bhavana, you were cultivating a democratic mind. Yeah, very interesting idea, isn't it? Interesting way of thinking about it. Yeah, when you're doing the Metta Bhavana, you're cultivating the kind of heart and the kind of mind that is willing and able to listen, to communicate, to try and understand others, to try and understand each other. Yeah, you're developing the kind of heart and mind that's got the confidence to put forward your own view, your own perspective, and at the same time the humility to listen to the view and the experience of others, as it were. Yeah, you're developing the kind of heart and mind which is able to negotiate and to compromise for the greater good and to cooperate with others. Yeah. So for Ambedkar, there could be no society without metta, and no society without communication, genuine communication based on metta. Yeah. So I've said that individuality without any higher goal becomes egoism, and that's a life where you're not free. Yeah, it's a constant battle. One's constantly driven, one constantly obsessive and on guard. And when you're like that, when you're not free yourself, you can't see others as free individuals. Yeah, they just become things that get in the way, or objects that you want to kind of control for your own well-being and freedom, as it were. Yeah. But again, if we have metta, that helps take us into a more true individuality, in the sense that Sangharakshita meant it. You experience yourself as a free individual, and then you're able to sort of experience others and see others as free individuals. Yeah. So metta, this sense of common humanity, is really crucial for any sense of common ground, any sense of social justice. Yeah. So maybe that's the third meaning of this sword that the Buddha brings to this realm. Yeah, it's a sword of justice. He's sort of pointing out something about where real freedom and real justice comes from. Last reflection, and then I'll wrap up. So we've had the sword of fearlessness, the sword of wisdom, the sword of justice. So lastly, I think this sword is the sword of the king. Yeah? So I'll try and explain what I mean about that. Yeah? So there is something impressive about the Ashuras and their qualities. Yeah? Their determination, their courage, their audacity, their drive, their energy. In a way, there is something that can be very good about that, or at least something very impressive about that. Yeah, putting it in sort of archetypal qualities, you could say they've got the qualities of the warrior. Yeah, it's the archetype of the warrior, but maybe the archetype of the warrior sort of gone wrong a bit. Yeah, because the true warrior serves the king or serves the monarch, and the monarch serves the greater good. That's the archetype, that's the ideal of serving the good of the whole kingdom, as it were, and the warriors helping the king or the monarch to be able to do that. Yeah. So you could say, in a way, the Ashuras, they've got all these impressive qualities, but they're serving the wrong king. Yeah. The power has become an end in itself. Yeah. And the Buddha, holding the sword, is saying to them, look, you need to use all that energy and determination, but use it for something better. Use it for something more worthwhile. Use it, ultimately, to serve enlightenment, to serve awakening. Yeah, because we do need that warrior energy. We do need that resolve. We do need that steely determination. It's just that they need to be kind of directed in a good way, in a helpful way, as it were. So when I was thinking of this, I was reminded of the figure of Padmasambhava. Yeah. So again, some of you will know that figure, some not maybe, but Padmasambhava is a sort of half historical, half mythical figure who took the Dharma, took the Buddhist teaching to Tibet, yeah, and was able to sort of overcome all sorts of resistance, where others hadn't managed to do this. He was able to sort of work with the forces that were in the society of that time and establish the Buddhist teaching in Tibet. And if you see images of Padmasambhava, he's this very sort of splendid figure, very handsome figure, long flowing black hair, amazing kind of robes, hat with a vulture's feather. But he has this incredible gaze. And it's quite a fierce gaze. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first saw images of Padmasambhava, I thought, ooh, not sure I like that. You know, that doesn't look very Buddhist. It's not very peaceful. He's got this incredibly sort of fierce gaze. Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, you also see that there is kindness in it. It's very hard to describe. You know, there's kindness. There's compassion in it, but there's also a certain sort of fierceness, yeah. And I suppose I interpret that as it's that warrior quality, but it's turned in the right way. It's used in the right way, yeah. He's fiercely seeing what's going on in his mind and not not allowing negative forces to take over the mind. It's just the kind of fierceness of real kind of clarity. Real kind of heedfulness and watchfulness, yeah? And it's a sort of fierceness of, he's looking at you saying, you can do this, yeah? He's kind of believing in you. There's a kind of fierce encouragement for you to have the same sort of determination and resolve, as it were, yeah? So yeah, this sword is also the sword of the king, as it were, the kind of archetypal king. He's saying to the ashras, look, yeah, these are impressive qualities, but you're serving the wrong king. You need to use these qualities for a kind of truer, better purpose. Yeah. So that's my talk, really. Just a particular kind of Buddhist take on the world we're living in, kind of seeing it in terms of this whole ashra consciousness, whole kind of ashra worldview, and how that just plays out in more and more areas of life, in more and more ways, and how, in answer to that, we need that green Buddha with that sword of fearlessness, pointing out the relationship between power and fear and where true fearlessness lies, the sword of wisdom, the sword of justice, the real source of the connection between metta and democracy and justice, and the sword of the king. Yeah. So just to wrap up, I want to go back to that quote from Jung. You can't see the lion that's eaten you. Yeah. And I want to say, you don't have to be eaten by the lion. Yeah. It is hard though. Yeah, these values are all around us. They're embedded in our world in so many ways. It's very, very sort of strong. It's very, very all-pervasive. And yes, sometimes it's really hard to go against it. Yeah. Maybe, for some people they're working in a certain workplace. And in a way that's the kind of culture. It's all about success. It's all about promotion. Those values are kind of there. And yeah, if you're not careful, eventually you just become that kind of person. You become the kind of person that works in that kind of place, yeah? So it can be very, very difficult to kind of go against this, yeah? But you don't have to be eaten by the lion. You really don't, yeah? I think it's possible not to be eaten by the lion if you've got three things, yeah? So the first thing is you need a strong vision and values. You need a strong sense of what you think life is really about. The second thing is that you need certain practices, certain practical ways, practical methods to actually start to live that out, to actually start to become that, to change, to develop, to learn how to sort of live out and embody that vision and values that you've got. And the third thing you need is friends and community that respect that support that, and that give you courage in your vision and in your values. Yeah. So in Buddhist terms, those things, of course, are the three jewels: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Yeah, and that's what places like this are for. Yeah, that's what we're doing here. We're just making that available to people. Yeah, that's, I think, our response to the world we're living in. That's what we're trying to share and pass on to as many people as possible. We're helping people not to be eaten up by the lion. Yeah, we're giving them the sword of wisdom, which is the sword of true fearlessness. We're giving them a chance to live a more human life and to share that and to pass that on to others. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Please help us keep this free. Make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. And thank you